Okay.
Hey, Ms. Jensen. So I'm going to do the first and second derivative test. Alright, so the first derivative test, we're going to do 4 steps, right? So first we're going to find the f prime. We're going to find the derivative. We're going to see where f prime is equal to 0. We're going to graph our point on a number line. And then we're going to plug it back into the first derivative to see it's positive or negative. And then from there we're going to be able to identify our max and mins. For our second derivative, again you find f prime of x. And then from that you find f double prime. Then you're going to do where f prime of x equal to 0. You're going to do a number line for those numbers. You're going to plug it back into the second derivative though, and you're going to see it's positive or negative. So we use these two first and second derivative tests to figure out maxes and mins, right? The only thing is for the second derivative test, if over here, if when you plug the number back in, and if you don't get a positive, negative, and if you get a 0, then the test fails, and then you have to use the first derivative test to find your max and min, right? So over here we have 2 problems, one for first derivative and one for second. So for the first derivative, we're going to do step 1. We're going to find the first derivative, right? So f prime of x. So it's going to be 3x squared minus 3x. So now factor, right? Because you don't want to divide, because that could take out certain stuff. Yeah, alright. So we have 3x, x minus 1. So this is x equals to 0 and x equals to 1, right? So that's when f prime is equal to 0. So then we're going to graph on our number line. We're going to do 0 and 1. And then we're going to use test points, right, to see if it's positive or negative. So for negative 1, we're going to plug it back into the f prime. So over here, so that's positive. So this will be positive. 1/2 will be negative, right? So 3 over 4 minus 3 over 2. Yeah, it'll be negative. And then 2 will be positive. So from here we can see our maxes and mins, right? So over here the slope is positive, and then it turns negative. So that's going to be a maximum. And then over here at x equals 1, it turns from negative to positive. So that's going to be a minimum, right? So then we're going to have to figure out our points, right? Because that's the whole point, to find our max and mins. So to figure out our points, we just do simple pre-cal and we plug it back in. So this will be 0, 0 actually. And this will be 1 minus 3/2, which is negative 1/2. So those are 2 points, right? And so you know this is when it's a maximum, and this is when it's a minimum, right? So for the first and second derivative tests, the only thing that you're gonna have to that's only kind of trippy is the sentence, right? So you know, so the sentence is by the first derivative test. I'm gonna just say dt. By the first derivative test, 0, 0 is a maximum because f prime of x, my bad, changes from negative to positive at x equals 0. So that's the sentence that you need to have. And then you're going to do the same thing for the minimum, right? So by the first dt, 1 comma negative 1/2 is a minimum because f prime of x changes over here will be from positive to negative at x equals 1. So that's the first derivative. So you find your max and min, so that's good. So now we're going to work with the second derivative test. Sometimes you use the second derivative test because the first derivative, the second derivative might be a little bit easier, right? So, so we're going to follow our steps. So we're going to find f prime. So f prime of x equals negative 15x to the 4th plus 15x squared. And then you're going to find f double prime. So this is negative 60x to the cube plus 30x. And then remember you factor, so that would be negative 30x, so that would be 2x squared plus negative 1. Oh god. Okay. Oh yeah, we're good. Wait, are we? Oh fuck. Give me a second. Wait, give me a second. Ah. Oh no, never mind. We're good. Okay. So basically, so over here. Okay, so this is f double prime of x. It's just a simplified version. So then we find so we find the critical points of the f prime. So we're gonna factor this one out. So we're gonna factor negative 15x squared. So that would be just x squared plus 1. No, minus 1. All right. So that's the same thing as that. So x plus 1 and x minus 1. So our points are 0, negative 1, and 1, right? So then we're going to do a number line with those points. So it's going to be negative 1, 0, and 1. And so now the thing is, if we plug these points back into the second derivative, not the first. So you plug it back into the second derivative. But you're going to use your test values, right? No, my bad. You specifically plug it back in there. My bad. Okay, so that would be, so f double prime of negative 1 equals, okay, so this will equal 30 times. You're just trying to look for the sign. You don't really have to, find the value. But so this is positive, right? So at x equals negative 1, the concavity is positive, right? So if it's positive, it's going to be a minimum. And then you do that for each one. So negative 30 is 0, then 2 times 0 minus 1. So this is 0 times negative 1, which is 0, right? So here what I was talking about, when it's 0, the test fails, right? So then you're going to have to use the first derivative. So then I'll explain that later. So let's just finish with 1. So that would be negative 30 times 2 minus 1, which is just 1. So it turned out to be negative 30, which is a negative. So if it's negative, it's a maximum. So we figured out negative 1 and 1. 0 though, it's a fail. So you're going to have to use the first derivative test. So this would be negative 1. Oh wait, my bad. This would be negative 1/2. This would be 1/2. And you're going to try to find the signs. So if you plug negative 1/2 into here, that's negative. And then over here, so that would be positive. And then 1/2 positive. So nothing really changed here, right? So it's just still positive. So now we found our mins and max, right? And then you use the sentence again. So by the second derivative test, I'm going to use dt like before. Negative 1, and then you're going to have to find your value. To find the value, just plug it back into over here. Is a minimum. My bad, I'm going to erase this so we have more space. Oops. Alright, never mind. Is a minimum since f double prime of x is greater than 0. That's all you have to write. And then by the second derivative test, we said 1 comma f of 1 is a maximum since f double prime of x is less than 0. And that is all.
I don't know how to turn it off.